Okay. This meeting is being live streamed. Okay. Got it. Okay. I found the person I was looking for. Afternoon, Mr. Logan.
Afternoon.
I don't have a hammer, so we'll call the meeting to order and ask the secretary to please call the roll. And this is the September 15 regular meeting of the Planning Commission. I see that we have Eric Copley as city staff. I thought I saw Robert Hewitt as county staff. I do.
Ben is also here, Sharon.
I'm here.
Okay. I see Ben. And is there any other city staff available? I see.
That's me. That's me, Sharon.
Okay. Miss Sewell, if you will, please.
David Boggs,
Here.
Patty Cross,
Here.
Keith Lee,
Here.
Paul Looney, Timothy Lesher,
Here.
William May, Daryl Sanderson, Charles Stewart,
Here.
Brent Swager,
Here.
Russell Wright,
Here.
Sharon Jackson.
Here.
Quorum of 9.
Okay. Thank you. Everyone should have a copy of the packet. There are 2 agendas. You should have gotten one from Ms. Sewell this afternoon and one that came earlier in the process. And I think Ms. Sewell's agenda has a longer list of bills that need to be paid. Vicki, is there anything else that's different from your agenda and the one that we received earlier?
No, actually, Cindy emailed me the bills today, and
Yeah.
I just inserted them into the agenda that Ben had sent out.
Okay. So the bills are the difference.
Yes, that's the only difference.
Okay. If that is it, then we'll have want to do the approval of the minutes from the special meeting and the August meeting of the Planning Commission. Does everyone have those? That's August 12 and July 29th, I believe. Minutes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I would move that we approve the minutes of the July 29th meeting and the minutes of the August 12th meeting.
Second.
Moved and properly second. Does everyone have those minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Moved and properly second. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll since we're not there in person?
Yes. Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
Yes,
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson.
Yeah.
Mr. Sand. Oh, you're here. Okay. Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yes.
And Vicky,
Motion.
Bill is
Yes.
online now too.
What?
Bill May has joined us.
Okay, thank you. I see.
Can you hear me?
Mr. May, we can barely hear you.
I'm trying, my camera, I've had trouble. I just reconnected it.
Okay,
I'm working on it. Keeps the video.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
thank you for letting us know. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the payment of bills. And you need to look at that second agenda item to see all of the bills that are due. Okay, is there a motion to pay the bills?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Move properly second that we pay the bills as identified in that second agenda. Again, Madam Secretary, since we're not in person, would you do me the honors?
Sure. Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
yes,
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May, Mr. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mr. May, Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Mr. May, Chairman Jackson.
Yes,
Okay.
it appeared that the mayor was a thumbs up on that one. But motion passed. Now, the staff items, going to check with, is Robert on?
He is.
Yes, sir.
Okay, with the county, do you have any staff items that you need to make us aware of?
Yes, sir. Due to my absence from the office, I did not have the opportunity to review the case file, staff report, and recommendation for the 3 requests this evening by Mike and Jamie Rice, the property at 1860 Cardwell Lane. I would ask that the commission table those items in order to give me an opportunity to return to the office and analyze. Thank you.
Okay, let's look at that a little bit further down the agenda there.
Does that include the zone change as well?
Robert?
Chairman, I would ask that all 3 items requested by Mike and Jamie Rice for 1860 Cardwell Lane be tabled this evening so I can have an opportunity to review the case files.
Okay, that includes the public hearing, whoever asked that question. And so that it doesn't get lost in the process, Chair will entertain a motion to table the public hearing and items 1 and 2 on the new business.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lee,
I make the motion that we table the public hearing of Mike and Jamie Rice on 1860 Cardwell Lane, as well as the 2 items of new business.
there's a
Second,
second.
second,
Moved and properly second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, seeing none. Madam Secretary, would you please do us the honor?
David Boggs,
yes.
Patty Cross, Ms. Cross,
Forgot about my unmute. Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Looney is not here. Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously.
thank you. Eric, did you have any staff items to mention?
No, nothing in particular until we get to the comp plan update, and I'm happy to share with the commission where we are on that.
Okay. As we speak, I think we are now at that point.
Sure. As the commission's aware, you all approved the scope and budget and ostensibly a contract which has not quite been finalized for the consultant for the comp plan. Since then, I prepared a funding request for the Board of Commissioners, at which time they approved their portion of the funding. The fiscal court was submitted a similar funding request from Mr. Hewitt, I guess 2 weeks ago now, I think is correct. They had a bit more discussion, and it appears as though there are a majority of fiscal court members that would prefer to commit to not just the comprehensive plan scope and budget and activity, but also a full zoning rewrite as well. So we have met with the consultant again, Sharon, Chairman Jackson, I should say, Mr. Hewitt, Mr. Judah, Mr. Miller, and myself. I've had a number of conversations with the consultant to see about whether they're available for such an activity to follow the comp plan rewrite and to procure and begin reviewing a scope and budget. So had a couple of calls last week with those folks to gauge their interest and timing and all of that stuff. So had some great conversations with them. We received the first attempt at a scope of services and budget from Liz just today. So I've shared that with Mr. Jackson, Mr. Hewitt, Mr. Judah, Mr. Miller, and I had a little bit of time today to start going over it briefly and just run through it once quickly for myself. But we will begin as promptly as we can to go through that and, make any comments and revisions that we feel like are going to be necessary. And then the intent is, without any undue delay, once we feel like that's a product that is acceptable and we can defend and pass on to the fiscal court, the intention is to take that back to the fiscal court for their consideration. And hopefully their approval of both of those funding requests as two separate scope of services and budget, but with that funding commitment already made, so that folks in the community that want to make sure we follow up the comp plan with that activity can feel comfortable that we're going to do that. At the Board of Commissioners meeting on Monday night, I shared this same update with my legislative body. I haven't gotten any firm commitments from that group, but I can say that I didn't hear any comments to the negative about following suit after the fiscal court does that. So my expectation at this point is to take that to them after the fiscal court, and unless I'm surprised by something, expect that they'll consider doing the same thing, so that we can do this together to keep the code as similar as possible, preferably essentially to do, my hope is, and I think the rest of planning staff, and not to speak for county's planning staff, but I believe they agree with this assessment, that we're as much as possible going to try to make this really one code that just has different areas of the community to really make it simple and easy to use for folks. But at any rate, that's the update. That's where we are. We'll continue working on it and hopefully get us started on that process in the not too distant future.
Okay, does commission members have questions?
Yeah, I do.
Eric?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Eric, just what I've picked up in the newspaper and an article or two about it. It kind of seems like, is this a fairly significant rewrite, or is it the form type zoning? I've not that familiar, and I've tried to dip into it some, but it would seem like this is could be a pretty serious overlay of what we have going on right now.
So two things on that. First, rewriting our zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations will all have to occur at the same time as we do this to make it make sense. So to the question of, is this a significant rewrite? The answer is, oh yeah, absolutely. This is a significant project that will take a good amount of time, just like the comp plan. So we are embarking possibly on a couple of years, probably, between the two projects, at the very least, to go from start to finish. So it's very significant. To your question about the form-based code, there was a lot of testimony about some of the fiscal court members about form-based codes versus other codes and their opinions about moving forward. I know Mr. Jackson and Mr. Hewitt and myself have discussed that. What's going to be important, just like the comp plan, is that this is a public process, and whatever the result of this code, whether it's form-based code or not, or whether it employs some hybrid characteristics, which I would imagine is probably the most likely scenario of some of the better parts of each thing. I think it's important that this is going to be the community's code based upon the community's vision, and we are not preordaining a result. That would obviously be inappropriate. So the process will take it where it goes with the help of our objective consultant, and with the help of, what the community helped share with us they want through the comp plan process, and then through the transparent and public process to draft the zoning code. So
Eric, is this significant enough that this causes any RFP issues, or I mean, it does not? Sharon shaking his head, no. Okay, good. We'll drop that as we speak. Okay, I want to make sure that I'm familiar with change orders. I used to be in transportation. We'd have those things quite a bit. So this can be done under the existing contract with the consultant, with add-ons that wouldn't change it enough to have to. Okay.
The good news is we haven't executed that contract yet. So I would like to think that we could expand the scope and then make sure that's included in the contract. And now I'll stop talking and let your counsel answer that question.
No, we don't have to worry about the RFP on this. But Eric, the one thing we do have to worry about is we need to make certain that we have as many public hearings for the rewrite as we do for the comp plan.
Right. So in our couple of discussions with the consultant, we've referenced that, of course, we will, the fact that we're doing this immediately following the comp plan, we will benefit from the fact that obviously we will have already had quite a bit of public input broadly. But we're making sure to include, public input as part of that process as well. So like I said, we just got the first attempt at the scope, but that's absolutely, that process can't.
All I'm bringing it up for is, obviously, that's going to increase the cost of this substantially by having that many more public hearings.
Correct. The good news is, like I said, because there will be some of that kind of visioning and fact finding that happens as part of the comp plan, this actually kind of will make it, if you choose to do the new zoning code, more affordable than doing it by its lonesome, because you will have some of that legwork hopefully completed in some direction that the consultant will have an idea where we want to go. But absolutely, this will be a public process.
Thank you.
Mr.
How
Chairman,
does the, oh, sorry.
That's Charlie, I think. Mr.
Yes.
Stewart, that's you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Eric, how does the form-based code differ from what we currently have?
Well, the simplest explanation is, most of what we have is essentially based in Euclidean zoning, which is that baseline when you think of separation of uses, fairly rigid permitted uses, not permitted uses, conditional uses, and then those typical bulk density and height requirements in different zoning districts. The way I like to explain it is, when you look at how a site is developed, Euclidean zoning does a good job of giving you setbacks and lot coverages and maximum heights and things of that nature that do a really good job of laying out on a site what you can't do. What I think one of the critiques of Euclidean zoning that supporters of form-based code and of the concepts in form-based code would tell you is that form-based code spends a lot of energy also actively telling you what we do want it to look like, whether that's through architectural standards or just very specific standards for build to lines or things like that. It's used often in new urbanist developments and like urban mixed use situations. In its most pure form, the other difference is, as I mentioned, Euclidean zoning is going to have very specific uses associated with most of your zoning districts. Form-based code, and it obviously depends if it's an absolute, pure form-based code or some other hybrid. But in that its most pure form-based code is going to, as much as possible, get away from telling you what the use is. It kind of follows the belief that if you get the form correct, then appropriate uses should follow. But obviously there's a whole spectrum of different versions of this, from, the most simple antiquated Euclidean zoning all the way to a full bore committed form-based code. So that's kind of a quick 2-minute description of the basic differences. But I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr.
Now,
Chairman,
Brent wants to make some comments here. But now, Brent, I have you on here a little bit further down regarding the conversation that you and I had. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Staff?
I do.
Okay.
I think Eric and Robert, you guys know that I'm a big fan in general of form-based codes. So I'm glad that's being discussed right now as a possibility, and you mentioned the idea of a hybrid. And, so in your discussions with the consultant that to add this zoning rewrite onto their work, did you get any indication that they have experience in writing form-based code so that they can bring, their knowledge of Euclidean and form-based code into the discussion equally? And have they had experience, let's say, in doing something like a hybrid between Euclidean and form-based?
In short, I get the impression from our conversations that, yeah, they have experience with both. And And actually, I expected today to get a few links to some other codes that they did. So I still expect to get that just so we, for our purposes, can see. But we've talked a lot about how, there's a whole spectrum of things that we can do, and that they've done those things in the past. They work with a lot of communities that have done form-based codes. They reference that they've worked with several communities that have form-based codes and brought them in to get rid of them as well. So I think, that's why thinking about, the pros and cons and the strengths of both philosophies, if you will be important as we go through. But yeah, at least from our conversations, feel comfortable that they have some working knowledge of both.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there other questions? Mr. Lee?
I have a question, I guess, for council. We're already kind of behind on this. I thought there was kind of a timetable or shot clock, as you will, of what we got to get this thing done. If this takes 2, 3, 4 years, is that acceptable? Is that legally acceptable? Is that going to make our decisions be null and void later on down the road? That's my question. Thank you.
No, Mr. Lee, that is the reason we went ahead and did just a general approval of the code the first time to stop the meter from running. If we had not done that, we would have no chance to do this big of a development. We've run out of time.
And I'll also add to that, Commissioner Lee, that we've discussed. I once again don't want to speak for Mr. Hewitt, but we've talked a lot about the order of operations of how we do these two tasks. And it's of my opinion, and I believe our consultant agreed, as we've talked about how to incorporate both tasks, that the first in the order of operations is complete the comp plan and then move to the second task. So the comp plan timeframe shouldn't change. We'll just be adding this after we complete that.
Okay, other questions by commissioners of staff? Okay, seeing none, hearing none. Thank you, Eric. I had some comments, but I think I'll keep them to myself until next time. Now, moving down the agenda, there's a couple of things that I need to mention in terms of tonight's meeting. First, Mr. Terrell was replaced on the Planning Commission, and it has typically been our procedure to provide a plaque to people who are rotating off, expressing our appreciation for them serving with us. Since we're not meeting in person, we'll just acknowledge Mr. Terrell's service and mail the plaque to him at his personal address. I spoke with Mr. Terrell. He expressed his appreciation for having an opportunity to serve pretty close to about 12 years on the Planning Commission, enjoyed his time with us, and of course he expressed some sorrow for not being able to continue with us, but enjoyed it. So we will mail, just make a note now in our minutes that we acknowledge his service, and we will mail the plaque to him. The second thing that I had in my notes is this. Before fiscal court had their conversation that caused us to go back to the consultant to get an estimate of what it would take to come forward and do the code rewrite. Commissioner Swiger and I had a conversation on two items, both of which I think are appropriate for him to share with you this evening. The first was the idea that it might be beneficial and appropriate for the commission to allow staff to look at, consider, and bring to us, meaning the commission, what they think may be appropriate for what we would call a monthly or quarterly activity report. And that is for items that the staff are approving administratively, providing the planning commission a summary of those things so that the commission would know or would have some idea of what they are actually doing in terms of planning and zoning over a period of time. There's lots of stuff that happens that we're not aware of. And of course, individual commission members can call and ask either the city planner or the county planner what's going on at different locations. But Mr. Swiger kind of thought this might be an opportunity to bring an idea forward. Now, I think we did this about 15 years ago, not sure, but wanted Mr. Swiger to comment on that with you all, as well as an idea that he had about form-based codes and trying to get some seminars or other information available to planning commission members so that they can become more familiar with the form-based code and how it may or may not affect planning in Frankfurt if that is where the planning commission chooses to go. Brent, I think I summarized it, but you make whatever statements you think you need to make. Clarify.
Well, thanks so much, Chairman Jackson. And you did a nice job of summarizing it, so I won't spend much time. The first thing is, I think from my perspective, and I would think for everybody else on the commission, it would be beneficial to really understand what's happening in the community beyond what we see on our agenda. There is, as Chairman Jackson mentioned, there's a lot of things that happen administratively, such as building permits being issued, development plans reviewed and approved. And so I think it would be good for us, but as well as maybe the public, to know what's going on, what type of development is happening, where it's happening, how many housing permits are going on. We hear a lot about housing and the housing needs, but I, personally don't really have a good feel of how many single family houses or how many apartments or townhouses are being built. So I think it would be beneficial, and I've seen this in other communities where a report is issued, and it could be something that's not every month, but it could be once a quarter, and just identifies what developments are on the way, or at least have been approved administratively, as well as stuff that's been approved by us. So we don't have to make any decisions necessarily tonight, but I thought it might be good to get just a small ad hoc committee together for a single meeting, just to put together what that report might entail. We want it to be not a burden on staff, but something that could provide information to us and to the public. And then on the second item, I thought it might be good to bring in a speaker to talk about the experience with form-based code. I understand that there was a training last year that maybe some of you attended that touched on that. I don't know to what extent that was about since I wasn't there, but I thought it might be good to have a speaker come in, for an hour and give an opportunity to ask questions. And my thought was not just for the planning commission, but to invite our elected officials too, because they're going to be right there with us in terms of the comprehensive plan update approval, as well as the zoning code rewrite and approval. So for them to understand what this is, and either to champion it one way or champion a different way, I think it benefits all of us to be educated on it. So I thought it would be worthwhile to do some research and try to find a speaker that could hit on form-based code and can tell you the pros and the cons and what happens if it's done right or what happens if it's done wrong.
Mr. Swigert,
Yes.
I would suggest that we do it so that members of the commission can get their continuing education requirements out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I just think if we make it something that's a forum open to more like staff as well as commission and get someone that is qualified as under continuing education, it would certainly help every member of the board.
Agree. So, I mean, that's something I don't mind taking a lead on and working with staff to try to find a speaker to do that.
Chairman Jackson, this is Robert Hewitt.
Yes, sir.
If the commission is interested in obtaining training, I would suggest that it be an objective training, not a focused, narrowed approach.
I think that would be an appropriate part of the conversation, Mr. Hewitt. That's why I suggested to Mr. Swigert that he worked with you and Mr. Cockley as part of the staff to identify a person. I think the person we heard a year ago was done through the Bluegrass organization that support planning and zoning in a number of counties in Kentucky. And so I kind of figured that you all working together would be able to identify the most beneficial individual that can provide that, and a time frame that would allow the commission to take advantage of it as part of its regularly scheduled activities. So I'm suggesting that you and Eric and maybe Ben and Jordan work with Mr. Swigert and any other commissioner who wants to be a part of that to have conversations around that topic.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Mr. Hewitt?
If I could briefly address the other topic of discussion.
Yes, sir.
I just want to make it clear to the commission and everyone else in the community that all administrative activities are public record. Anyone can request them at any time. I'm happy to report to the commission of every activity that I do. But if this commission is so concerned with a lot line adjustment on a 100-acre farm on Union Ridge Road, then I don't know if that's valuable time spent with the commission. Okay, there are so many activities that go through my office that for me to present this body with all that documentation will further extend your agendas and the length of your meetings. It'll go back to mission creep. Back in 2005, this planning commission adopted new subdivision and development plan regulations that if application complied with the regulations, it could be administratively approved. I have no reason to think that neither city or county staff have done anything to put a question in the mind of this commission that anything other than what is in the code is being followed.
Robert, hopefully, I did not mean for you to feel like this was an attack. This is not an attack on or a question on the work ethic or anything like that. It just is simply for us to get an understanding of, it's not really your workload, it's an understanding of what is being developed in the community. So this is not a question on anything about staff or staffing levels or anything like that. This is simply to understand how many building permits are being issued over a certain period of time, how many development plans, or where the major development plans are. You're right. I don't care about the shifting of one property line that you are, that example that you gave. That's not the intention. So if I came across that way, I'm sorry, and that was not what was meant.
If I may, I mean, I think if we, Robert and I can meet with Brent and anyone else that's particularly interested and maybe work into something. We referenced in that discussion reporting of a whole lot of different things. And I think that's probably what gives Mr. Hewitt and I pause when we hear that about what kind of reporting and how often. I'm imagining a few other scenarios that are probably going to spend a lot less time for us and probably get the information that's going to really be interesting to you all.
Right.
It might be that there are some things, as you mentioned, that maybe we do just share with you what projects happen quarterly or something, and then perhaps share some reporting of some statistics, annually, or I think we should get together and just chat about what's the best information and how we can do that without spending time in a fashion to just share information. But obviously, as Robert mentioned, just for purposes of, folks like to know what's going on. With the knowledge, though, that when we're talking about, development plan reviews and those things that might be underway, obviously that's not information we share until it becomes a public record, until things get approved. So there may be things that we can't share that are in progress, but let's just get together and figure out the most appropriate way.
That sounds good, and I am aware. I don't want this to be a burden on your time. It has to strike that balance where you're not just spending days and days working on it.
Okay. Well, it seems that we've struck a balance here that says that staff and Commissioner Swager and whomever else among the commission may want to participate would sit down and talk about both those items and come back and tell us what it is that we might do. It may be that we don't do anything, that what is current is appropriate, but allow them to sit and talk about it and then come back to us.
Mr. Jackson, may I make a point here?
Yes, sir, Mr. Logan.
I was going to report to the commission later. Today, we were dismissed as parties from the Frankfurt Shell Food Mart versus Racetrack Petroleum. One of the reasons we were dismissed is we took no administrative action on the development plan. So I think we should be very careful about how we review building permits and make sure that there's no approval from us involved in this. Or as your lawyer, I'm going to be a lot busier.
We applaud your ability and your willingness to do that work, Mr. Logan. I just as soon not have to go and be served.
But I thought so.
But we do encourage staff and Mr. Swager to kind of sit and talk about that.
Oh, I agree.
If there are no further comments, Madam Secretary, would you please call the first item on the old business?
That would be item number 2 under old business. Item 1 is still tabled by the applicants. Public hearing continuation. KT Holdings LLC is requesting approval of a zone map amendment from Rural Residential A District RA to Agricultural District AG for 50.0597 acres of property on Hickman Hill Road. The property is more specifically identified as PVA map number 104-00-00-005.00. This is a county item.
Okay, I think we have a quorum of the people who heard the item here, so we can vote on it. But before we move forward, there's background in somebody's Zoom. Please either mute your mic or turn off the background thing. That'll help us a whole lot. There are separate summaries of the public hearings that were made available to you. But prior to that, I need to inform members of the commission that as chair, I received in the interim, matter of fact, this week, about 6 emails related to the Hickman Hill project. And because we at the public hearing closed the public hearing and indicated that the taking of testimony would cease, those emails were not distributed, and we will recognize them as having been received, but they cannot have a role in this decision. I forwarded those emails to staff and to our attorney for the record. And Mr. Logan, I need to know if I should forward those to the secretary as well.
That would not be a bad idea, Mr. Jackson.
Okay. But with that said, Chair will entertain a motion to remove the item from the table and to adopt the summaries of the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I already closed the public hearing to allow that to be going. We're going to make a motion to open the public hearing. I assume that's what you're asking for. Is that right?
Yeah, well, we need to make a motion to remove the item from the table. Remember, we closed public hearing table the item so that a summary could be prepared from which we would make our recommendations. So we really just need a motion to remove it from the table.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to remove the item from the table.
Second.
Move properly second. All in, well, Madam Secretary, we're not in person, so would you please do the honor?
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson, Mr. Sanderson, Mr. Sanderson.
There, you're muted.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yes.
Motion passed
You
unanimously.
didn't count my, you didn't, Mr. Wright, yes, you skipped on me there. That's, I
Oh,
didn't,
I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Okay.
And Charles Stewart, yes.
Yeah, Charlie Stewart, yeah.
Well, if you all didn't participate in the last public hearing, you really don't need to be participating in this part.
Well, I did,
Okay,
yeah, and I went back and reviewed it on Facebook, which the
Oh, that's right, you
said was
did, yes.
adequate. He said,
right. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Motion passes. Item removed from the table. And now we need to have a motion to adopt the summary public hearing. Come on, don't be shy.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion, we adopt the summary. It's part of the record for the public hearing.
Second.
Moved and properly second. And you all have to be patient with us because we're not in person. A voice vote is nearly impossible. Madam Secretary, would you please?
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson. Mr. Sanderson. Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously.
thank you. Now the floor is open for findings of fact.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lee,
I'd like to make the finding of fact that the current zoning of RA is appropriate for the property located at 850 Hickman Hill Road.
second.
Second.
Moved and properly second. Madam Secretary.
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
No.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yes,
Motion passes 8-1.
other findings of fact.
Mr. Jackson, I'd like to make a finding of fact.
Mr. Swager, please.
The proposed zoning classification of AG is not in agreement with the comprehensive plan future land use category of suburban residential neighborhood for this property.
Second.
Who
Moved and
seconded
properly-
that?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moved and properly second. Mr. Swager, on what page of the summary are you reading from?
That did not come from the summary.
Okay. Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
Could you repeat that one, please?
the proposed AG zone district is not in agreement with the comprehensive plan.
Okay. No.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
No.
Motion passes 7-2.
Other findings of fact.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Ms. Cross.
Okay, the property is surrounded on three sides by properties that are zoned agricultural AG.
Say that again.
That the property is surrounded on three sides by properties that are zoned AG.
That's second. If people are looking for that, you find that in the staff report on the front page. And it's under the heading of surrounding land use and zoning.
Just to clarify, Patty, you said it was zoned AG. I'm looking at this. None of these are zoned AG.
No.
You are correct.
No.
Three sides are residential.
Well, the staff report indicates on the north, properties are zoned RR, agricultural, and residential. On the south, the properties are zoned RR, agricultural, and residential. On the east, staff report indicates that the zoning is RA, agricultural, and residential. To the west, it's zoned RR and agricultural. That's page 1 of the staff report. I'm neither for nor against. I'm just saying, for clarification purposes, what the staff report provides you.
And you are correct. My apologies. I believe what I intended to say is that they have agricultural uses on those three sides.
Well, I'll second it, and let's make a determination, Madam Secretary.
Mr. Boggs,
What's the motion? I'm sorry. I heard a second, but what was the exact?
Okay.
we already voted-
That the property is surrounded by properties that are used for agricultural uses
Okay, got you.
on three sides.
All right.
Mr. Boggs,
no,
Ms. Cross,
Oh dear. Yes.
Mr. Lee,
No, but I'd like to explain my vote. I don't believe the word surrounding is correct, and so therefore I'll vote no on that.
Mr. Lusher,
No,
Mr. May,
no,
Mr. Sanderson,
no,
Mr. Swager,
No.
Mr. Wright,
No,
Chairman Jackson,
Yeah. There's an agricultural use on all three sides of it. So I have to
Motion.
vote yes.
motion fails 7-2.
Other findings.
I'd like to offer a finding.
Yes.
There have been no major changes within the area that were anticipated in the comprehensive plan.
Okay. I will make sure that it's clarified. You're saying that there were no major changes in the area that were not anticipated by the comprehensive plan.
Correct.
I'll second that.
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
No.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yeah.
Motion passes 8-1.
Other findings?
Chairman,
Yeah.
I make a motion to find facts cease.
I'll second it.
Moved and properly second. Any discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. And now the floor is open for a recommendation
Mr.
to
Chairman,
the fiscal court. Yes, Mr. Lee.
based on finding of fact number 1, I recommend that the requested approval of zone map amendment from rural residential A to RA, RA2 Agriculture District AG, 55.172 acre property on Hickman Hill Road be denied, and we would recommend that to fiscal court.
Second.
Moved and properly second. Discussion on the motion. Discussion on the motion. There being none, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
I'm sorry, I read a whole different set of summaries. I'm voting no.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-1.
Okay. The next item on the agenda,
Continuation of public hearing. Ellis R. Carter, care of Charles E. Jones, is requesting approval of his zone map amendment from agricultural AG district to industrial general IG district for 53.5 acres of property located on Manly Leestown Road. The property is more specifically identified as PBA map number 060-00-00-024.01. This is a county item.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I was not at this meeting, but I have listened to the audio and video of this hearing. So I believe if council allows it, I'm prepared to vote.
Mr. Logan?
Yes, sir. I believe that that qualifies Mr. Lee to vote.
Madam
Thank you,
Secretary.
Mr. Lee.
So,
You can participate, please. Chair will entertain a motion to remove the item from the table and adopt the summary of public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I believe Mr. Lusher wants to speak first, please.
no, just to follow up on Mr. Lee's statement, I also reviewed the video of the last meeting and like that read into the record or entered into the record.
Mr. Logan?
Yes, sir. He is qualified to vote.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I also reviewed the video of the meeting that I missed.
Mr. Logan?
Yes, sir. I believe that the review of that qualifies the, Mr. May to also vote.
All right. Anyone else? If not,
Mr. Jackson, I'd like to make a motion to remove the item from the table.
Second.
move properly second, Ms. Sewell.
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously.
thank you. Floor is open for a motion with regard to the summary of public hearing.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lee,
I make a motion that we enter the summary into the record, public record.
Second.
moved and properly second that we adopt the summary from the public hearing. Madam Secretary?
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously.
thank you. Now the floor is open for the identification and adoption of findings of fact.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lee,
I make a motion that we adopt findings of fact number 1 and 2 on page 12 of the staff report.
Second.
moved and properly second that we adopt as findings of fact item 1 and 2 of the staff report on page 12. Madam Secretary?
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously.
thank you. The floor is now open for a motion with regard to recommendation to fiscal court regarding the request by Mr. Ellis. Carl,
Mr. Chairman, before I make a motion, Unless there is any other findings of fact, I make the motion to close findings of fact.
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. I'd forgotten all about that.
Yeah. Oh, he was skipping ahead.
Madam Secretary.
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Now, the floor is open for a motion with
Mr.
regard to
Chairman.
the request of Mr.
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to fiscal court the approval of the zone map amendment from AG to industrial general IG for the 53.5 acres of property located at Manley Leestown Road, based on findings of fact number 1 and 2, with the condition that the final development plan comes before this body.
Second.
Moved and
Second.
properly second.
Oh.
Madam Secretary, let me ask this, is there discussion on this motion? Hearing none, seeing none, Madam Secretary?
Chairman Jackson, this is Robert Hewitt.
Yes, Robert?
Counsel for the applicant had offered up a certificate of land use restriction similar to what they've done on the other acreage. Is that consideration by the commission this evening?
Well, we were assured
My
that
thought,
it would be
my thought,
filed.
Mr. Chairman, was we would do that when the final development plan comes before us. I have no problem adding that to my motion, but my thought was that would be more suited at the approval process of the final development plan.
That's good with me. Thank you.
Robert, would you mind explaining just once again what that entails, what that is?
Certificate of land use restriction is established in KRS Chapter 100, and it is a recorded document, and in this case, Franklin County Clerk's Office in the deed room, which is a binding restriction on the property specific to only those activities identified in the restriction. So it goes above and beyond anything that the local regulations provide. And so that has been offered and was recorded on the other acreage on the Dobner True Farm, and it was offered under testimony on the Ellis Carter Farm. And so I just wanted to make sure that the commission kept that in mind, and that I think that is an appropriate tool to ensure the compatibility of this property with the surrounding uses, and that it will only be limited to those few things shown in the certificate. And that will run in perpetuity.
And just to give me an idea, we're talking about, I think the proposal at this point was 3 warehouses and the roads that connect them. And I'm not sure if there's anything else.
I have not seen the draft document, and if so, I've been out of the office, and I apologize. That is a document that the commission needs to review and accept. But I have no doubt that the applicant and their counsel will follow through with what they've done previously, and they've been good stewards of the land up there so far, and I expect nothing less.
Mr. Chairman, to answer Brent's question, that's one of the reasons I put the condition of, we know if it's not 3, it's 4. We know exactly what it is when they bring in when they come back to us with their development plan, we will be able to know that. But Mr. Chairman, if let's go and put it in there right now. If I could amend my motion to include a condition that the certificate of land use restriction be included as well.
Second. Okay. Ms. Logan, is it appropriate to do it now or at the development plan stage?
Well, I think it's appropriate to say that we want it, and I think Mr. Lee is saying we want it when we do the development plan. So I believe it's covered in that motion.
In that case, moved and properly second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Boggs,
Yes.
Ms. Cross? Ms. Cross?
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Lusher,
Yes.
Mr. May,
Yes.
Mr. Sanderson,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Chairman Jackson.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Did you get Mr. Stewart?
Mr. Stewart didn't participate.
Okay. Okay. Motion passes. Is there anything else that needs to come before the commission? Mr. Logan?
Yes, sir. I wanted to report that, as I did earlier, that the lawsuit that had been filed naming the commission and the members in their official capacity was dismissed this morning by the judge. And I will be, I've tendered an order. As soon as it's signed, I will distribute it to the county and city for their inclusion in the record.
All right. Anything else that needs to come before the commission? If not, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Move properly second. You may vote by turning off your screen. Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Guys.
Uh-huh.
Bye.
I'm sorry, Mr. Swiger left. I was going to tell him it was unfair to get to play video games while we were working.
Oh, was that him?
He had the headphones on. I knew he was doing something extra. I just didn't know what.
Who seconded that motion?
To adjourn?
Yes.
Several of us.
Okay.
Miss Cross, I think, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just choose one.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Have a
Thank you.
great week.
Good
Hey,
night.
Vic,
Huh?
by the way, did we note that both the attorneys were on that hearing for that, the first motion? You know, we had the residents as well as the applicant represented by counsel. Were they on? Did they get on the hearing site?
Well, Charlie was on. Mr. Jones was on. I'm not sure.
On the KT Holdings case? They were
Yes.
the-
Both were there.
Yes, he was there.
I
Okay,
believe
that's
that
what
he
I
was
want. I want to
there.
make
Yes.
sure they got noticed. Thank you.
Nathan Billings, yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
he was there.
Both of them's names were on the thing.
Yeah, there he is.
Have a
Yes,
great
for the
night.
record, I got notice and was on the hearing. Thank you, Mr. Logan.
All right, sir.
Hey, thank you. Good night.
Good
Good
night,
night.
everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
All right.